It's April 18th, 1942, 8:20 a.m., Pacific Time. Lieutenant Colonel James Harold Doolittle stands on the deck of the USS Hornet, 650 miles east of Japan. Behind him, a North American B-25B Mitchell medium bomber, tail number 40-2344, sits at the edge of the carrier deck. The nose wheel is positioned exactly on a white painted line. Doolittle has 467 feet of wooden flight deck ahead of him. A fully loaded B-25 needs 1,200 feet of runway to get airborne. The math doesn't work. Everyone knows it. The Navy deck officer watching from the island superstructure knows it. The sailors who pushed the bomber into position know it. Doolittle himself calculated these numbers 100 times in the past 4 months. But here's the thing about impossible math. Sometimes you do it anyway because the alternative is worse. 4 months earlier, on December 7, 1941, the Japanese Navy destroyed or crippled 8 American battleships at Pearl Harbor. The attack killed 2,403 Americans in less than 2 hours. Since then, Japan has been on a rampage across the Pacific. Wake Island fell on December 23rd. Hong Kong surrendered on December 25th. Manila fell on January 2nd. Singapore, considered an impregnable British fortress, collapsed on February 15th, with 80,000 Allied troops captured. The Japanese Empire now controls territory from Burma to the Gilbert Islands, a zone stretching over 4,000 miles. American morale is in the basement. The public wants blood. The military needs a win. President Franklin Roosevelt wants to hit Tokyo. There's just one problem: geography. Japan sits 2,400 miles from the nearest American-controlled airfield in the Aleutian Islands. No American bomber in 1942 has the range to fly there, drop bombs, and return. The new B-29 Superfortress won't be operational until 1944. The B-17 Flying Fortress has a maximum combat radius of about 1,300 miles. Not enough. Carrier-based aircraft don't have the range either. Navy SBD Dauntless dive bombers can hit targets maybe 250 miles from the carrier, then they need to come back. For a carrier to get that close to Japan means steaming into heavily patrolled waters, which means losing the carrier. The Imperial Japanese Navy believes the home islands are safe. Their calculations are sound. American carriers can't get close enough without being detected. American land-based bombers can't reach them. Tokyo is untouchable. Admiral Ernest King, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Fleet, doesn't accept untouchable. In January 1942, Navy Captain Francis Lowe walks into King's office with a wild idea: launch Army Air Force bombers from a Navy aircraft carrier. Get the carrier close enough for the bombers to reach Japan, then fly west to Allied airfields in China. A one-way trip. King likes it. He calls in Admiral William Bull Halsey, commander of Task Force 16. Halsey likes it too. They need someone to plan the actual mission, someone who understands aerodynamics, fuel calculations, and modified engine performance. Someone who can fly anything with wings and isn't afraid of physics that say no. They call Jimmy Doolittle. At 45 years old, Doolittle holds a doctorate in aeronautical engineering from MIT. He's a former test pilot who in 1922 flew coast to coast across America in under 24 hours, a world record. He's flown air races, performed aerobatic demonstrations, and pioneered instrument-only flight. If anyone can make the impossible math work, it's him. Doolittle looks at the numbers. He picks the B-25B Mitchell. Medium bomber, twin engines, 5-man crew, wingspan 67 feet 7 inches, length 54 feet 1 inch. The Hornet's flight deck is 809 feet long and 86 feet wide. That 67-foot wingspan is a problem, but it fits, barely. Now he just needs to figure out how to launch 16 of them. Real quick before we continue, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. What city? What state? What country? And hey, what time is it where you are? Always cool to see how global this audience is. All right, let's get into why this shouldn't have worked. The North American B-25B Mitchell weighs 27,000 pounds empty. Fully loaded with crew, ammunition, and fuel, it weighs 31,000 pounds. The aircraft was designed to take off from runways at least 3,000 feet long. USS Hornet can give Doolittle 467 feet for the first bomber. The last bomber, number 16, parked furthest back on the deck, gets maybe 150 feet before it either flies or goes into the Pacific Ocean. Carrier-based aircraft solve this problem with catapults and arresting gear. The B-25 has neither. It's a land-based bomber. Its landing gear isn't designed to handle the stress of carrier operations. The tailwheel can't take a catapult launch even if Hornet's catapults were big enough, which they're not. Doolittle runs the calculations. A standard B-25B takeoff at maximum weight requires 1,200 feet. To get airborne in 467 feet means changing everything about the aircraft's performance. He needs more power, he needs less weight, he needs better lift coefficient at low speeds. Here's what he can't change. The mission requires 1,100 gallons of fuel. That's 6,600 pounds of aviation gasoline. Without it, the bombers don't reach Tokyo, let alone make it to China. He can't reduce bomb load below 2,000 pounds because then the mission is pointless. The crew needs to stay at 5 men: pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, gunner. Cutting crew means losing capability they might need over hostile territory. So Doolittle starts cutting what he can. The lower gun turret comes out, saves 600 pounds. The liaison radio set comes out. They won't be talking to anyone anyway. Another 230 pounds gone. The heavy-duty Norden bomb sight gets replaced with a simple aluminum sight that weighs 20 cents worth of metal, designed by Captain C. Ross Greening. Not as accurate, but accurate enough for the targets they're hitting. Even with modifications, the numbers are brutal. Doolittle needs 30 knots of wind speed across the deck to generate enough lift. The Hornet will steam at maximum speed, 25 knots, into a headwind. That gets him close, but close isn't good enough at 467 feet. In February 1942, Doolittle takes 2 B-25s to Naval Air Station Norfolk, Virginia. He practices short takeoffs, over and over, rotating early, holding the nose up, letting the bomber dip toward the water before it catches air and climbs. The pilots who'll fly this mission watch him. Some think it's suicide. Doolittle proves it's possible. Barely possible, but possible. He handpicks 24 crews, volunteers only. He doesn't tell them where they're going or what they'll be doing, just that it's dangerous and they won't be coming back to the carrier. 80 men say yes. The training is intense. They practice short-field takeoffs at Eglin Field in Florida. They strip their bombers down. They load extra fuel tanks, one 225-gallon collapsible tank in the top of the bomb bay, another 160-gallon tank in the crawlway. Every available space gets a fuel bladder. They practice low-altitude navigation over water. They practice fuel conservation techniques, leaning the mixture, reducing RPM, calculating optimal cruise altitude to stretch every gallon. Nobody practices landing on a carrier because it's impossible. This is a one-way mission. The plan: launch from Hornet 400 miles off Japan's coast, bomb Tokyo and other cities, then fly 1,200 miles west to airfields in China controlled by Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist forces. Total flight time: about 13 hours. Fuel capacity: 13.5 hours if everything goes perfectly. What nobody's saying out loud: if the weather's bad over China, if they can't find the airfields, if they run out of fuel over the ocean, they're dead. All 80 men. On April 2, 1942, the USS Hornet departs San Francisco Bay with 16 B-25s strapped to her deck. The sailors don't know where they're going. The bomber crews don't know when they're launching. Task Force 16 steams west into the Pacific. Destination: 400 miles off the Japanese coast. Then everything goes wrong. April 18, 1942. 3 a.m. Pacific time. Task Force 16 is 650 miles east of Tokyo. The Hornet, accompanied by the carrier Enterprise, cruiser Northampton, cruiser Salt Lake City, oiler Cimarron, and 4 destroyers, has maintained radio silence for 16 days. They're supposed to get 250 miles closer before launching. The plan calls for a pre-dawn launch at 400 miles out, giving the bombers darkness to approach Japan and enough fuel margin to reach China. Then, at 7:38 a.m., the Enterprise's radar picks up a contact, surface vessel 20,000 yards ahead. It's the Nitto Maru, a Japanese patrol boat, part of a picket line stationed 650 miles offshore to warn Tokyo of approaching enemy forces. The Japanese have excellent intelligence. They know American carriers are dangerous. They positioned 50 patrol boats in concentric circles around Japan specifically to prevent what's about to happen. Admiral Halsey, commanding from the Enterprise, faces an immediate decision. If the Nitto Maru radios Tokyo, the mission is compromised. Japanese fighters will be waiting. The carriers will be vulnerable. He orders the cruiser Northampton to sink the patrol boat. At 7:45 a.m., Northampton opens fire with her 8-inch guns. The Nitto Maru transmits 3 words before being blown apart. 3 enemy carriers. The message gets through. Tokyo knows they're coming. Halsey signals Hornet. Launch planes. To Colonel Doolittle and his gallant command, good luck and God bless you. It's 8 a.m. They're 250 miles farther from Japan than planned. This isn't a 200-mile flight anymore. It's 1,450 miles to targets, another 200 miles to China. Total, 2,650 miles. The B-25's maximum range with extra tanks is approximately 2,400 miles. The math just got worse. Doolittle doesn't hesitate. Every hour they wait, Japanese fighters get closer. His crew rushes to bomber number 1. The deck crew positions it at the starting line. Deck Officer Lieutenant Henry Miller stands to the left, holding a checkered flag. The Hornet turns into the wind and pushes her engines to maximum power, 25 knots. Natural wind speed, 20 knots. Combined wind over deck, 45 knots. The carrier pitches violently in heavy seas, the bow rising and falling 60 feet with each wave. Miller signals Doolittle, rev engines. Doolittle runs both right R2600 engines to full power, 1,700 horsepower per engine. The bomber shakes. Miller watches the deck pitch. He needs to release Doolittle when the bow starts rising, so the B-25 gets an upward trajectory boost. Timing is everything. Miller drops the flag. Doolittle releases brakes. The B-25 rolls forward, engines screaming, 467 feet of deck. The bomber accelerates, 40 metros, 50 metros, 60 metros. Doolittle rotates early at 70 metros, well below normal takeoff speed. The nose comes up. The main wheels leave the deck. The bomber dips toward the Pacific as the carrier's bow falls into a trough. For 3 seconds, it looks like bomber number 1 is going into the ocean. Then the B-25 catches air. Climbs. Doolittle banks left, circles once, sets course west. He's airborne at 8:20 a.m. Behind him, the deck crew pushes bomber number 2 into position. Lieutenant Travis Hoover, pilot. Same drill. Flag drops. Engine roar. Acceleration. Rotation. Airborne. One after another, the B-25s launch. The spacing is tight. Every 3 minutes, another bomber goes. Lieutenant Robert Gray in bomber number 5 almost doesn't make it. His left wheel lifts off with only 15 feet of deck remaining. The bombers circle, form up loosely, then head west at 200 feet above the ocean. At 9:20 a.m., exactly 1 hour after Doolittle launched, the 16th and final B-25 lifts off. Lieutenant William Farrow's bomber had maybe 150 feet of takeoff roll. Every single bomber made it off the deck. 16 B-25s heading toward Tokyo. 5-man crews, 80 men total. They're 650 miles out, flying at wave-top altitude to avoid radar. Fuel gauge is already showing less than full because of the extra distance. China is now mathematically unreachable for most of them. Nobody turns back. Doolittle's bomber reaches the Japanese coast at 12:15 p.m., 7 hours after launch. He's flying at 200 feet, skimming the wave tops to stay under radar. The coastline appears. Green hills. No fighters. No anti-aircraft fire. The early warning from the Nitto Maru didn't specify exact location or timing. The Japanese are looking for a carrier strike, not land-based bombers approaching from the east. Doolittle climbs to 1,500 feet. Tokyo spreads out below him. He can see the Imperial Palace, the Sumida River, factory districts, residential neighborhoods. It's 12:30 p.m., Tokyo time. Civilians are eating lunch. Nobody sounded an alarm. Bombardier Staff Sergeant Fred Bramer opens the bomb bay doors. 4 500-pound demolition bombs. Target: industrial facilities near the waterfront. At 1,500 feet, traveling 225 macho, Bramer releases. 4 bombs fall. Doolittle banks hard left and dives back towards the deck. Behind him, explosions. Black smoke rising. The next 15 bombers arrive at intervals over the next 30 minutes. They hit Tokyo, Yokohama, Osaka, Kobe, Nagoya. Lieutenant Ted Lawson, piloting bomber number 7, goes in at rooftop level over Tokyo, so low his crew can see people's faces looking up. His bombs hit a factory complex. One bomb creates a secondary explosion so violent it rocks the B-25. The Japanese response is chaotic. Air raid sirens wail. Anti-aircraft batteries open fire, but they're aimed at high altitude, expecting carrier-based dive bombers at 10,000 feet. The B-25s are at 1,500 feet or lower. Flak bursts above them. A few Japanese fighters scramble, but by the time they reach altitude, the bombers are already heading west at full throttle. Not a single B-25 is shot down over Japan, but the fuel problem is now critical. That extra 250 miles at launch means every bomber is running on fumes. Doolittle's navigator, Lieutenant Henry Potter, calculates they'll run out of fuel 200 miles short of the Chinese coast, maybe less if they hit headwinds. They hit headwinds. At 6 p.m., 8 hours after departing Hornet, Doolittle's fuel gauges read near empty. They're still 300 miles from the Chinese airfields. Darkness is falling. Heavy cloud cover. Rain. The Chinese airfields were supposed to activate homing beacons to guide them in. The beacons aren't on. Communication breakdown. The Chinese didn't know the raid was coming early because Task Force 16 maintained radio silence. At 8:45 p.m., Doolittle's engines cough. Fuel starvation. He's somewhere over China. Exact position unknown. Visibility 0 in the rain and darkness. He orders his crew to bail out. 5 men exit the aircraft at 8,000 feet in pitch darkness over mountainous terrain. The B-25 crashes into a hillside and explodes. All 5 crew members survive the jump. Doolittle dislocates his shoulder landing in a rice paddy. 15 other bombers face the same situation. Most crews bail out. A few attempt crash landings in fields or beaches. Lieutenant Ted Lawson crashes bomber number 7 on the beach near Shangchao. The impact is catastrophic. Lawson's leg is nearly severed. The crew survives, barely. One bomber, piloted by Captain Edward York, realizes they can't reach China. York turns north, crosses into Soviet territory, and lands at Vladivostok. The Soviets intern all 5 crew members. The USSR is technically neutral with Japan and can't let American bombers operate from Soviet soil. Of the 80 men who launched from Hornet, 3 die in crashes. 8 land in Japanese-occupied territory and are captured. The remaining 69 make it to Chinese-controlled areas with help from Chinese civilians and nationalist soldiers. The raid delivered 16 tons of bombs onto Japanese targets. Damage is minimal. A few factories damaged, about 50 Japanese casualties. Tactically, it's barely a pinprick. Strategically, it changes everything. The Japanese capture 8 airmen. They're taken to Tokyo, held in military prison, and interrogated. On August 28, 1942, a Japanese military tribunal convenes. The trial lasts 1 day. All 8 are sentenced to death for targeting civilian areas, a charge the Americans deny, stating they hit only military and industrial targets. Emperor Hirohito commutes 5 sentences to life imprisonment. 3 men are executed by firing squad on October 15, 1942. Lieutenant Dean Hallmark, Lieutenant William Farrow, and Sergeant Harold Spatz. They're 24, 23, and 22 years old. A 4th prisoner, Corporal Jacob DeShozer, survives 40 months in Japanese POW camps. Lieutenant Robert Hite, Lieutenant George Barr, and Sergeant Chase Nielsen also survive and are liberated in August 1945. The Chinese pay a far higher price. The Japanese Imperial General Staff is furious that Chinese civilians helped American airmen escape. On May 15, 1942, less than 1 month after the raid, the Japanese Army launches the Zhejiang-Jiangxi campaign. The objective? Destroy the Chinese airfields that were supposed to receive Doolittle's bombers and punish the Chinese population for assisting the Americans. The campaign is brutal. Japanese forces systematically destroy every airfield within range of Tokyo, roughly 20 facilities. Then they turn on the civilian population. Villages that sheltered American airmen are burned. Entire towns are massacred. Chinese sources estimate 250,000 civilians die. The Japanese use biological weapons, cholera, typhoid, plague, dropped from aircraft onto cities. It's a scorched earth retaliation campaign designed to ensure no American bomber ever again finds refuge in China. Doolittle believes the raid is a failure. He lost all 16 bombers, 3 men dead, 8 captured. The damage to Japan is negligible. He expects a court-martial. Instead, President Roosevelt awards him the Medal of Honor. The American public, starved for good news after 4 months of defeats, treats the raid as a massive victory. Newspapers headline, "Doolittle Doed It." Morale surges. But the real impact happens in Tokyo. The raid humiliates the Japanese military. Enemy bombers struck the home islands, flew over the imperial palace. If B-25s can reach Tokyo from a carrier, what's stopping the Americans from doing it again? The Japanese High Command concludes they need to eliminate the American carrier fleet immediately. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the combined fleet, accelerates plans to attack Midway Island. The strategy: force the American carriers into a decisive battle, destroy them, establish a defensive perimeter so far from Japan that no carrier strike could ever reach the home islands again. Yamamoto sets the date, June 4, 1942. Operation MI. The Japanese commit 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, plus battleships, cruisers, destroyers. The largest Japanese naval force assembled since Pearl Harbor. Their objective is to finish what they started on December 7th. The Battle of Midway lasts 3 days. American codebreakers have decrypted Japanese communications. The U.S. Navy knows Yamamoto is coming. On June 4th, American dive bombers from the carriers Enterprise, Yorktown, and Hornet catch the Japanese carriers with their aircraft on deck, refueling and rearming. In 5 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers are burning. The 4th, Hiryu, goes down that evening. Japan loses 4 fleet carriers, 248 aircraft, and 3,057 sailors. The Pacific War's momentum shifts permanently. Historians debate whether Midway happens without the Doolittle Raid. Yamamoto was already planning offensive operations. But the raid's psychological impact, the humiliation, the vulnerability exposed, pushed Japanese leadership toward the aggressive timeline that led to Midway. 16 bombers, 80 men, 1 impossible launch. The Doolittle Raid proved that American audacity could overcome physics, geography, and enemy calculations. It proved carriers could strike anywhere. And it proved that sometimes the missions that seem most hopeless deliver strategic results nobody predicted. Doolittle flew 67 combat missions total during World War II. He retired as a lieutenant general in 1959. He died in 1993 at age 96. Every year until his death, he attended reunions of the surviving Doolittle Raiders. They drank a toast from silver goblets engraved with their names, one for each of the 80 men who launched from Hornet on April 18, 1942, the impossible mission that changed the war.